Okay, I'm talking to the guys today. Men, if you're a writer, then at some point or another, you're going to have to write a female character, um, likely more than one, unless you're J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm slightly kidding, but still. Um, you may have one or more major characters who are who are female. You might have a male lead and a female lead, or even if you have a male lead, you might have a love interest or something like that. So the question today is, how do you write female characters well as a man? I think we've all seen some good examples of this. I think we've all seen some pretty terrible ones too. We know they're out there. So how do we avoid those common pitfalls and treat female characters with respect and make them realistic and fleshed out characters and everything? It's the same with a video for you. That's the topic I'm going to try to tackle today in 10 minutes or less or so. And I guess I said I was talking to the men. Hopefully, if you're a woman watching this, like a girl, hopefully you won't tune it out because you may have some good suggestions for us to listen to. Also, I mean, the things I'm going to say maybe to a lesser extent could apply to women writing men. I mean, I'm sure there can be difficulties there too. Just crossing the gender divide, dealing with life experiences you've never dealt with. Although I think some of the particularities to men writing women have been especially particular to that situation, and we know that it's been overblown, and or in many cases it's done. It's more maybe more obviously bad, and more obviously sometimes sexualized. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So yeah, I'll start with just talking about bad examples. I mean, we've all seen some. I mean, first of all, personality wise, like how do you flesh out a female character, make sure she's a real character. It's too easy, and I mean we regardless of gender and demographic and such, we all have a tendency to rely on tropes sometimes, and tropes aren't bad, but it can be a pitfall um, to make a character just a trope without really fleshing them out beyond that. And we think of things like the strong female character, like the tough action hero, and that trope has gotten some criticism these days, and I understand where that's coming from. Here's the thing: I don't think as a trope in itself, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I do think, like any trope or any type of character, the character needs to be fleshed out beyond just that. She needs to be more than just this tough badass warrior or whatever. She needs to be a real human being, a real person, which includes being multifaceted and at least some of the time having moments of vulnerability and weakness and transparency too, even if that's not her default mode. I do have a character like that in my story. She's kind of a tough vigilante who's had a hard life, had a hard past, and has a lot of unresolved bitterness and anger issues, and I think over time she had some redemption is the goal, but yeah, she is. I would call her a strong female character if you allow me to use that term. But I hope, and some people who have read it have told me, I hope she is a real character too. And there have been times like in the past, probably still today, but like even in like archaic literature, people have said like scholars have noted like the female characters were usually either like the this angelic, peaceful, docile, submissive woman, like the ideal woman, or like a whore, basically. And those are the main tropes. Obviously, we don't want to do that. I mean, again, if someone falls into one of those categories broadly, if a character falls into one of those categories, and that's how it needs to be for your story, great. But that can't be all she is. That can't be her entire identity. She needs to be, real. She needs to be to have a purpose and a humanity and such beyond that. But moving from personality, I also, and this make it a little weird for some people, but just bear with me. I want to talk about bodies too, because we have to write physical descriptions, and it can be hard and weird. And I'll raise my hand here for a man to, realistically but respectfully describe or portray a woman's body. And I've seen some bad examples of this too. I don't remember what story this was, and it's probably a good thing I don't remember because I'm not gonna say good things about it. In fact, I don't think it was even a published book. I think it was maybe like a fan fiction online or just some online story that someone showed me to kind of make fun of how bad it was. So and again, I have no idea what story this was. So even if I even if I wanted to tell you, I don't remember, so that's probably a good thing. But somewhere, sometime, I read maybe a sampling of a story online, I think, and it was, I guess there was several of the main characters were, were women, like a group of female friends or something, and obviously written by a man, and I think it was a first person narrator, and it said something like introducing another character through the narrator's eyes. It said like she was a like size C breast, or size C bra, like with a 34 waist or a 24, and like each character introduced, it described her by her measurements pretty much solely, and I'm like, that's pretty terrible. I mean, that's an extreme example, of course, but that's that's bad. And like, I think my female friend who was mentioning it to me, or who pointed it out to me, was like, yeah, I mean, sarcastically, she was like, yeah, I always think of other women in terms of their breast size and waist size, which obviously women don't do that. People don't do that. I mean, and hopefully men don't either. But yeah, so it's just so we've seen some bad examples, to say the least. We've seen some examples of I mean, obviously there's a problem beyond just the writing sphere. I mean, this extends to many areas of life, but and we have a sexualized culture that in many ways and many times has and still does objectify women. Um, can't tackle all that today. I'm trying to tackle the writing area, but but yeah, we've seen this done poorly a number of times of just women being treated as sex symbols, or even just flat characters or something like that. Um, so here's the thing. So those are the bad examples. Um, I realized from my story, I have I have an ensemble cast, but I have two major main characters, and again, it's a superhero story, so it's an action story. So like, I am dealing with, like, I guess, able-bodied characters and such, and like one of them was the one I mentioned just now, that is slightly dark vigilante. Um, and I've said this before. I realized physical descriptions in general, not just about people, but in general, are not my forte. Like, I, I tend to be good at dialogue, good at characterization. I think describing physical things with details, like either a scene, a setting, or like a person's appearance, not my forte. Doesn't give me a free pass, but it means I have to kind of work more consciously to work up to that. I've described these characters, and I have a picture of them, a drawing similar that someone did, and I have in my mind a picture of what they look like, and I described it basically but I probably just give like the basic details, like hair color, like she had dark hair pulled into a ponytail, and like she wasn't smiling or something like that. Like that might be all I say for like 200 pages about what she looks like. Um, and I mean, maybe that's better than the example I shared before, where you define a woman by her measurements. But still, I'm like, yeah, there probably is a time and a place for more detail than that. And again, these are superhero characters, so like I don't want to sexualize them. I certainly don't want to define them by their breast size or anything like that. But um, they're physically fit. I'm guessing, full-bodied, able-bodied, um, who who can fight and fly around and stuff like that. And yeah, probably attractive. From head to toe, I'll try to put it that way. To be gentle, I want them to be attractive. You know, from head to toe. And so I haven't so in my story so far, I haven't really described what what their curves or anything look like, and I don't necessarily need to get into that detail. But um, I started asking myself, like, what are some respectful ways I could like write this description without it getting weird or problematic. And I think part of the reason I thought like that was because I'm reading the Wheel of Time series. Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. This is book 5. I'm hoping to finish it in a couple weeks, and I'll give you my review then of this book. I've shared in previous reviews of this series, and it is kind of a matriarchal society. I mean, there's more than one. There's several male characters and several female ones, but it's like the world that the author has devised. The females are for the most part, the females are the only magic users, which gives them power in some ways over men. And then there's also, in this book at least, the main character Rand, who is male, but Rand is spending a lot of time with a group called the Aiel, which is like a kind of a warrior like group who lives in the wastelands, like almost Spartan like, as far as very practical, very tough, no nonsense, and such like that. And there's both male and female IEL, but there are also but there are like the kind of the female ones are the strongest or toughest warriors. So it is in many ways like um, focusing on some strong women. And yeah, there's some characters, there's some female characters who are, I don't know, might fall into those stereotypes of being young and naive, and or sometimes being too crazy over a man. Like, yes, with a large cast of female characters, that kind of thing does happen some of the time. But there's certainly ones who are, strong and practical and sensible and many different things. And I think it does a good job at fleshing them out. Um, I will say, it meant I started thinking about this topic because this book includes physical descriptions. Again, I don't think it sexualizes them overly. I mean, it might say some. I think a few times it says something like she folded her hands under her breasts, or it's like she. I don't know. Again, physical descriptions are not a strong suit, so I need to go back and maybe find some specific ones. But has said things like. Um, like she was a tall figure, or she had just now part of it said like like her legs were longer than Rand ever realized, or something like that. And I guess the other thing about the Aiel is because they're these Spartan-like warriors, they sometimes go around with few or no clothes, and like that's not shameful to them. It's just kind of practical. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't give detailed, explicit physical descriptions, but it has said like one of the girls in the part I'm at now is named Avienda, and Rand has at least a brief romance with her. And it said like Avienda was walking around with no clothes on, and Rand saw her, and he had to struggle to keep his thoughts not distracted and stuff like that, which is realistic of if that situation would have happened. I think for most warm-blooded straight men like myself. And so I guess I'm kind of in some ways wanting to emulate this book. I mean, not this book solely, but I'm like, it's doing a good job. Like I think like it's describing a world where women's bodies really exist. The writer isn't afraid to talk about curves or sex where it's appropriate. But I don't think it's getting into like Game of Thrones level. I mean, I haven't read Game of Thrones, so sorry if you're a fan, but everyone says it's known for like its raunchy, explicit scenes and such. And the author has criticized like Tolkien for not including sex as part of his world at all. Like sexuality is never talked about. And then Game of Thrones, from what I know, from what I've heard, goes too far in the opposite direction. If that's the case, then I would say Robert Jordan strikes a good balance. That he mentions, there's clearly at least implied sex, and there's you know women's bodies have a shape, I don't think it goes too far into describing them. So I guess like what I need to think of is I guess I'm trying to implement this for myself, for my own story, in describing my characters, especially my two female superheroes who again are able-bodied and full-bodied. I assume, in my mind and such, and like how can I describe them and be detailed and realistic, but not be extreme or explicit. It's not my goal. I actually just searched a little bit, and I don't know how you feel about this, but at work I've been experimenting with AI, and just I was like, hey, like ChatGPT can help me, like I mean, obviously not with actual writing, but just like with ideas. Like I don't know if you're looking for names or like character names, or I had one scene where it was like I was like or at a family in a trailer park. I'm like, what's a meal they would eat that's affordable? So I actually asked ChatGPT like kind of what are some ways to describe a woman's body without like being explicit or focusing solely on her curves and such, and it gave me some good things like you use descriptions like athletic or I don't know, graceful and nimble um, and words like that. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good start. So I don't know. So anyway, in my revisions of book two, I mentioned or sorry, book one. I'm revising the first few chapters. I'm almost done. I've scrapped and rewritten some scenes and such like that. But yeah, in my revisions, I kind of want to there's a few more details I want to tie together. I'd like to at least maybe go back and the first few times I introduce these female characters, maybe mention at least their shape and their bodies. I mean, not in a weird way, but try to do that in a respectful way. Try to give them some detail without going overboard. So that's one of my next tasks in revision. If you're hearing this and you've listened this far and you're a writer or a reader, man or woman, I mean, you have different perspectives, but and I want to hear from both. Tell me, like, what's one good tip for writing women that maybe men don't know, or maybe men don't do enough? Because I want to hear from you too. Okay, thanks for listening, and have a great weekend. Keep writing. Bye.